actually.
Is that the one where they go? Is that the one where they go into space?
No, dude. Do not. They go into space for that.
They go into space
They
eventually.
take that series way too far.
All right, let's roll. We got to get out of here.
Hoosier and Elvis.
Welcome to episode 14 of the Health Matters Predictors podcast, recorded on December 10th, 2024. I'm your host, Jay Rock, and today we got the boys in the building, and there's a doctor in the house. Orthopedic expert Dr. Preventure, the Patriots head surgeon who's seen it all, from Super Bowls to super bad injuries. The one and only GOAT Zajac, and our prediction whiz, Nate Dogg. We're diving into the big takeaways from week 14 and towards week 15 we are looking. But before we get into it, let's kick things off with the Rod Zone. Welcome to the Rod Zone. We got a lot of good hits for you guys. It was an explosive week. Let's start off with the Lions, the kings of going forward on fourth down against the Packers. They converted 4 of their 5 fourth down goes in the game, including 2 fourth and goals for touchdowns. With a busted up defense, Dan Campbell said he is looking to use that offense more to win, and it absolutely shows. The Raiders got their first fumble recovery in 942 defensive plays after sacking Mayfield, and they converted that into a touchdown, but they couldn't take that momentum to a win, unfortunately, for the Raiders Nation. Granted, the Steelers were down 13-7 at half to the Browns. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. The Browns have a slew of problems, and their kicker, Dustin Hopkins, is for sure one of them. Russell Wilson is having the season that he's needed to have after such a depressing experience with the Broncos. He only threw for 158 yards and didn't have Pickens to throw the ball to, but the Steelers still got the job done. And crazy enough, on the Steelers side still, Mike Tomlin has had 18 consecutive non-losing seasons and holds a 191 to 113 record, but has still never actually won Coach of the Year. Kind of crazy when you think about it. Josh Allen had another insane game this week with his 6 touchdowns. He recorded 51.88 fantasy points, which was the most points a quarterback has ever recorded in fantasy history. The Rams played a hell of a game against them as well. Matt Stafford, Puka, Kyron Williams, and Cooper Kupp all had fantastic showings on Sunday. Sam Dalton and Kirk Cousins threw for basically the same yardage, but Kirk threw 2 interceptions and 0 touchdowns, while Sam had 5 TDs to his name. Kirk Cousins left the Vikings after rumors surfaced that they were drafting a new quarterback, and on Sunday, he was outplayed by the future that he feared. So probably best he ended up going to the Falcons in the end for him. And heading right over to the Bengals, Joe Burrow bought a Batmobile because he's ready to be the hero of his city. And last night, he succeeded in that by beating the Cowboys. Burrow has passed for over 300 yards and 3 TDs for 4 straight games. If the Bengals defense could perform even half as well as the offense, they could be a playoff-bound team. And with that, let's head right into the new injuries of the week. All right, looking at a couple of the new injuries this week, Nate, let's head straight to the man at the helm. What quarterbacks got a couple of injuries, and how are they looking?
Yeah, J-Rock, we got Aiden O'Connell, and he was originally thought to have suffered a season-ending knee injury, but an update says that it's just a bone bruise. Then we have Derek Carr with a left-hand fracture, which is his non-throwing hand, and Will Levis with an AC sprain in his right shoulder. He's been dealing with that all season. Now, these quarterbacks have severe enough injuries where all these organizations could consider benching them for the rest of the season because they're not going to make the playoffs. So, Doc, when we talk about all 3 of these quarterbacks, you know, they're very different injuries. But what would you expect as far as what these medical teams are thinking for the rest of the season?
Yeah, so Aiden O'Connell was originally thought to be much worse. I mean, air cast, getting carted off, and now MRI comes back at a bone bruise. That's best case scenario. We usually don't see that. And so when you're talking about a bone bruise to the knee, usually sometimes the knee can get in a hyperextension or a bad position, so you can have the knee go in a position that comes forward and just causes this big bruise in the front or the front of the tibia, these can be a several week injury or less. It just depends how big the bone bruise is, if there's any associated capsular meniscus injury, but everything else looks okay. And if it's just going to be the bone bruise, we could potentially see him back even next week. Maybe not at the same level, but we could see him back next week. I think 2 to 3 weeks, as long as everything else works out. Now, what's interesting on Derek Carr, left hand non-throwing. So you're talking about left hand non-throwing. When he came down on it, when you look at the video, the thing we always worry about is what's called a scaphoid fracture. And a scaphoid fracture is right here. It's called the anatomic snuff box. And that's this bone deep right at the base of the thumb. And if you break that, sometimes it needs surgery, but sometimes it can be treated in a cast. You have to put it in a cast. It's in a cast for a long time, sometimes 8 to 10 to 12 weeks to get this thing to heal, because a scaphoid bone has a blood supply that's a little bit tricky to get it to be able to heal. So sometimes you put a screw across it right away, get it back to stability, and then you can use a cast for much less time. Good news is it's a non-throwing arm, but guess what? A cast in a quarterback's non-throwing arm can still affect you when you're throwing, just from the balance and the flow and how you feel through the game and how you're behaving just there in the pocket.
We all know that quarterbacks are the king of the pitch, and you want your QB1, you don't want your QB done, if you know what I'm saying. Heading right over with Bucky Irving, running back for the Bucks. Tyler, what happened to him, and how's the team looking after this?
Yeah, well, J-Rock, Bucky Irvin was already dealing with a hip injury, and now he adds a back injury to that. He tightened up on him in the first half of Week 14's game. He tried to ride the bike, tried to come back, was unable to return to that game. When asked, the coach has left it kind of up in the air. He's not sure. He's saying, hey, his back is tight. We're going to try to loosen it up this week. Not sure if he's going to be able to play. This is huge for a lot of fantasy players who have been riding his production into the playoffs. The Bucs are eyeing a 4th consecutive NFC South divisional title. So this is a huge injury. Everyone should be watching his practice and practice injury report throughout the week to see if he's able to go this week.
Thanks for that, Tyler. Heading right over to the 49ers. I mean, they have been absolutely plagued with injuries this year. That bus score is not looking super hot. Nate, we got Isaac Guerrero, running back for the 49ers. What went down with him on the pitch this weekend, and will he be coming back anytime soon?
Yeah, J-Rock, their whole running back room, like you said, has been plagued with injuries. He had a great game against the Bears on Sunday. He had 128 yards from scrimmage and 2 rushing touchdowns until he sprained his foot in the fourth quarter. Now, they have Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason on IR, and he doesn't have much time to heal. They're playing the Rams on Thursday night, and this is their divisional rival, so you know that Isaac Guerrero wants to play in this football game. Doc, with your experience, he wants to play in this game. You're playing your divisional rival. You only have a couple games remaining. They really need to win some games to make the playoffs. If this is just a grade 1 sprain, could you see them activating him?
Yeah, grade 1s are tricky, Nate, in the midfoot. And so, the problem is, for his position, all of the weight is going to go through this midfoot, and it's all about pushing, flexing, and extending that forefoot. And it's a huge problem because that capsule and that injury there can be a big problem. So the problem is it's big. It can be quite sore. You can have problems with it down the road. I think it's risky to activate him this week and make sure he's playing. We'll watch the practice reports, so stay tuned to the Predictors for some more information on this player.
Thanks for that, Doc. And heading right over to the Bucks again. Their safety, Antoine Winfield Jr., did suffer a knee sprain, and he will be out for a couple of weeks. And as we know, this NFC South conference is in a tight race. So this is going to be good for the Falcons. Obviously, they have their own things to worry about, but any time that you can get an advantage from another team having an injury, you're going to take it. You're going to run with it. So this and Bucky Irving injury will be brutal for the Bucs for their playoffs hopes, but it's not necessarily over for them. And then looking right over to Demarion Overshown. He had an absolutely blowout knee injury. Tyler, put the people onto that.
Yeah, well, if Aiden O'Connell had the best case scenario, Demarion Overshown probably had the worst case scenario, tearing his ACL, MCL, and PCL in his right knee. Dallas hasn't been eliminated yet from the playoffs technically, but they are 3 games behind Washington and have 5 teams between them and Washington all vying for that last wild card spot. So it is pretty much done for them. Regardless, for Demarion Overshown, it is done. He also, this is horrible for him, but he also missed his entire rookie season with a left ACL tear. So now this is on his right side. He missed his whole rookie season with a left ACL tear. He was the Cowboys' second leading tackler this season. So this is really hard for that defense, really hard for him. Doc, we're getting towards the end of the season. He's a young guy in his second year here. He's had an ACL on one side and an ACL, MCL, PCL now on that right side. For his future, coming from someone with your type of medical background, what do you think for him? What does his future look like? And how long will he be out next season, do you think, considering when this happened?
Yeah, it's hard when you have ACLs now on both knees. When you look at our data at the Predictors, when you have bilateral, meaning both sides ACLs, it's a problem. And a second leading tackler, I see that slipping a bit, but he's a great player, and the great players still elevate because they've just got great DNA. They got perseverance. He's already demonstrated perseverance, Tyler, and how to get back from that original ACL injury on the right knee. Now, the left knee seems to be much more complex. He's got 3 ligaments of the 4 injured. This is a long recovery. You're looking at least September, October next year, Cowboys fans, to get him back. And it could potentially be even longer. But I would shoot for September, October, and we're going to see how it goes. But he's going to have to ramp up next season over a slow time period.
Blowing 2 ACLs, not super easy to come back, but definitely not impossible. And let's look to Week 15, see a couple of players that are coming back from injury, maybe playing through injury, but they want to make a big statement on the pitch anyway. And we got a hot ticket name here that we want to start with. We got George Pickens, that boy. Tyler, he was off this week with a hamstring injury. Is he going to make it back out this week, or do you think he's got a little bit more time to rest and rest up?
Well, J-Rock, I think it's going to take him a little bit more time. They thought he was going to play Week 14, tried to go out there in pregame warmups, decided that he couldn't go with that hamstring injury. Then it was initially thought this would be a 1-game absence only, but an MRI has now shown that the injury is worse than expected. Mike Tomlin hasn't ruled him out for Week 15. However, he labeled Pickens as doubtful at best for this week against the Eagles, which obviously is not a good sign. So if you have Pickens on your fantasy team and you are in dire need of a wide receiver, you can look to Mike Williams, Calvin Austin III, or Van Jefferson, as they will be the wide receivers for the Steelers in Game 15 or Week 15, most likely. Doc, it's a hamstring. Again, we talk about these all the time. MRI looks worse than originally thought. Is this the best thing? Just keep him out and let him recover the best he can.
Rest rules hamstrings. At the end of the day, Tyler, you're exactly right. And if you come back too early, the re-injury risk is high. In addition, he's got a re-injury risk of something he hasn't even injured before: knee, ankle, Achilles, foot, etc. Again, thepredictors.com. We've looked at all of this. Check it out online. Hamstring can be a little bit of quicksand.
George Pickens is an absolute dog. Needs to get that hamstring together, and maybe a little bit of his personality, a little too rambunctious out there, talking a lot of trash. But let's be honest, he backs it up. So he needs to get back out there to prove that he's got what it takes. And I know he does. Nate, looking at Dalton Kincaid, tight end for the Bills. PCL injury it's looking like. Give the people a little bit on that.
Yeah, J-Rock. He suffered this PCL injury in Week 10, and they played the Rams last week, and the Bills were preparing to play him, but decided to leave him out. Now, we talked about Christian McCaffrey's PCL last week. Doc, he's been out since November 10th. It's been about a month since the injury. Could you describe this injury a little bit more and what the recovery timeline is like?
Yeah, so not all PCLs are the same because there's multiple different grades. And the PCL, it's opposite to the ACL. Here's the ACL in the front. The PCL right here is in the back of the knee. And what it does is it helps keep the tibia stable this way. It helps prevent posterior translation of the tibia. There's also some rotation mechanics with it, some other things, but it's a big ligament in the knee, and there's really 3 grades. So you're probably at a lower grade, maybe grade 1 to grade 2 is what we're thinking for him. So this is in general maybe a 5 to 8 week recovery to try to get back and ramp up. So we may see him pretty soon, but again, it's going to be one of those things where you see, again, at thepredictors.com, you're down 20% the first week, down maybe 10, 15% the week after that. And then by about 3 to 4 weeks back, you kind of get this knee back to where it needs to be. But a very common injury in his position.
Tight ends can have a hard time doing what they need to do, especially without a PCL, but it's been about 5 weeks now, so possibly another 3 to 5 weeks before we see Dalton Kincaid again. But the Bills are doing fantastic. They should be in the playoffs, so Dalton's time should be coming up again soon. Tyler, looking at Josh Downs, wide receiver for the Colts, what happened to him this weekend, and do we think he's going to bounce back quickly?
So Josh Downs had a bye this past weekend. His AC joint was injured on week 12. And he missed the next game against the New England Patriots, bye week last week. So we're all looking for him to return this week, hopefully. Their head coach for the Colts wasn't overly confident about a return quite yet. So he even said, watch the practice reports, see what happens. However, we know that with an AC joint, especially in a wide receiver, if he is close, there is some padding, some possible injections that he could do to make it out on the field. So we'll have to see if he's able to have even some limited practices this week. If possible, maybe they can pad that thing up and get him out there because they could surely use him. And hopefully he's able to, as I know myself and some others probably have him on their bench and ready to put him back in that starting lineup.
Sounds good to me. Josh, first downs. Let's get him back out there. Doc, just looking at the NFL, do you guys do a lot of injections? Is that something that's pretty routine?
It depends, J-Rock. I wouldn't say they're routine. I would say they're routine for certain injuries. AC injury is one that's pretty routine. It's a very safe injury. First of all, as a doc, for any of the players or in the NFL or in the locker room for them, you want to make sure you're doing the absolute right thing for the player first. You want to make sure that it's safe, that they're not going to injure themselves further by, masking something. So AC joints, something that's pretty safe as an example for something that will inject and, let them go back and play even in the middle of the game. We already saw that earlier in the podcast.
Thanks for that, Doc. Injections are big in the regular world, and they have a place in the NFL as well. All right, heading over to the Panthers, we got Adam Thielen, wide receiver for the Panthers. He did have a hamstring injury during the Panthers' win against the Raiders in Week 3, and he did show back onto the team when they played the Kansas City Chiefs a couple of weeks ago, somewhat in a limited capacity against the Chiefs, but during the Bucs and the Eagles games the past 2 weeks, he has recorded around 100 receiving yards for both of those games. So you can tell he's really starting to get back in form, and you love to see that. And for the Panthers themselves, it's been a pretty rough season, but these past 3 games, the Chiefs, the Bucs, and the Eagles, on paper, these should have been blowout games. But the Panthers have honestly almost won all 3 of those games. The Panthers are looking to be the team that is a hot team you really don't want to play because they will pull the rug out from under you. So basically, if Andy Dalton hadn't gotten into that car crash and hurt himself, would Bryce Young even be throwing the ball right now? Doesn't even really matter because right now Bryce Young and the Panthers are getting a good amount of momentum, even with losses, that I think that they should take into next season and start looking towards a much more solid season for themselves next year. And as we know, health matters. Let's go to where health matters most, baby. The bus stop. Go! Trust the bus, trust the bus, trust the bus, trust the bus. You know how it works around here. Tyler, looking at the bus scores for this week, what are you seeing and how should the people be feeling about it?
Well, guys, we have some very exciting health games to watch this week. As we know, we're getting closer and closer to the playoffs, and every win or every loss matters now. So a few games to make sure you watch out for is the Rams versus the 49ers this week. There is a big health discrepancy between these two teams right now, and both teams are in the hunt to grab that last wild card spot. So that could play a massive role. The Bills and the Lions. They have probably the biggest separation with the Detroit Lions being last, 32 out of 32 in our bus scores, and the Bills currently at around second in these pre-bus scores. They are 2 powerhouses, though, on the field. We know the Detroit Lions are gritty when it comes to their record, but different ends of the spectrum here when it comes to health. May be interesting to see how they handle that to make sure that they don't have any more players injured if possible, since they already have wrapped up a playoff to be in the playoffs. The Seahawks and the Packers are the final team here. Both are currently in the playoffs if everything ended today. However, since it does not, they still have some work to do. They have almost an identical bust this week. almost identical, which is huge because the NFL puts the Packers playoff chances at 97%, while the Seahawks sit at just 60 to 65%. So this is a big game for Seattle, where they can control their own destiny here. And it's going to be really important to see if that health being as equal as it is, if the Seahawks can step it up. Doc, if you are the medical staff for the Bills or Lions team, you've already made the playoffs. Is there anything you're doing to try to reduce the amount of injuries, especially if you're the Lions where you're already in trouble, but knowing that you still have a few games left this season that you need to hopefully win just to make sure everything goes well?
Yeah, the Lions are eking it by, and that is reflected in the bus. They're not doing well, Tyler, like you said. And like we talked about last week, I'm concerned about the Lions. You're concerned about them. And being the medical staff and the coaching staff, these are collaborative decisions. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a coaching decision as long as the player is eligible to play. And that's, the medical advisor and the head athletic trainer, the head physician are really important to help put that communication together and to try to decrease risk as you head into the all-important playoffs. There's a few games left here, but we're starting to see a big breakout here, and I'm worried about the Lions. Unless they get healthy and get some of their defense back, they got a huge issue to deal with. We need to get some of those people back from short-term IR and others for them to have a successful run. So all of that's on the table, Tyler. You've got to work closely with your coaching staff, your head athletic trainer, your therapist to see where the players are and try to minimize that risk. And if you can rest a game, it's massive in the NFL.
It's a long road to the Super Bowl. Lots of ups, lots of downs, lots of Josh downs. But let's be honest, we all know what the ultimate goal is. Stay healthy enough to win the Super Bowl and bring it back to your franchise. Thanks for hanging out with us this week on the Health Matters Predictors podcast. We covered all the important takeaways from Week 14, and we're looking ahead to the action coming in Week 15. The regular NFL season is reaching its peak, but the excitement keeps on coming as we head towards the playoffs. Pickens is more than likely out again this week, maybe another week in him. The Raiders got lucky with Aiden's bone bruise. And looking at the bus score, we got two powerhouse teams facing each other, but simply put, one's healthy and the other isn't. So let's see how it plays out for the Lions versus the Bills. Be sure to join us next week for more expert insights, bold predictions, and all-around elite vibes. Until then, stay locked in, and may your parlays bring you the best results. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter @thepredictors_, and check out our website, thepredictors.com, for everything NFL. Every week is a new chance to level up and trust the bus. We'll catch you next time, boys and girls.
Go!